Many of us in the freshwater world think that keeping a saltwater tank is so difficult. We think it takes a bunch of money, a ton of equipment, and it's too complicated to learn and be successful at it. Myself included. But I'm here to tell you, that's a bunch of crap. This tank right here behind me is living, breathing proof that none of that is true. If you're new to this series, let me introduce you to the low-tech, fish only with live rock, tap water only saltwater tank. Or what I like to call it, the LT Fowler 2.0. Let's go. This tank is now about 2.5 months old, stocked with my Emperor angelfish since day 2 with the prime stability method, and he's doing great, eating every day and putting on visible, noticeable size since then. As you can see though, I have entered the diatom phase. I've got some diatom algae growing on my substrate, a little bit on the rocks. This is something that's very common and happens to all new tank setups, whether you're using tap water or not. I simply vacuum it out during my water changes, but it's gonna continue to come back until it doesn't. Normal diatom phase. But how low tech really is this tank? Well, I'm using regular tap water to make my salt mixture, not RODI filtered water. I'm running on just a canister filter with an inline UV, a heater, a light, and a wave maker. Nothing that we don't already use on our freshwater setups. No sump, no skimmer, no dosers, no fancy controllers, none of that stuff. But there is one piece of equipment I believe you must have in order to have a successful saltwater tank. One piece of equipment that we don't normally use over on the freshwater side, and that is an auto top-off system. An auto top-off system does exactly what it sounds like. It automatically tops off the water that has evaporated from your tank. But why is this important in the saltwater world when we barely even give it a thought in the freshwater side? Good question. Because when water evaporates from a saltwater tank, it leaves the salt behind, meaning that the salinity levels in the entire tank will rise, and that can be very deadly to your entire stock. I covered the whole evap thing in this video right up here, so if you want to learn more about it, make sure to check that out. Today I'm installing a very simple, easily affordable ATO system that doesn't break the bank, because we do want to keep this setup as economical as possible, at least to start with. The whole point of this saltwater project is to show you guys that you could dip your toes into the saltwater side without putting in much more effort or expense than you already are in your freshwater hobby. It's called the Duetto Squared from XP Aqua, and it came highly recommended from my bro Ozzy Albies from the Atlanta Braves. He uses this thing on all his monster tanks and sold me immediately when he showed me how well this thing works. I said, bro, where can I get one of those? And he sent me one right away. Do yourself a favor and go check out Ozzy's fishes both here on YouTube and on Instagram. He's got monster tanks with monster fish with some big projects coming down the pipeline that you're not gonna wanna miss. Now, the first thing that I did to set this bad boy up was grab my spare 10-gallon quarantine tank and use that as my freshwater reservoir. You don't have to use a 10-gallon tank. I actually prefer if I had a more vertical tank for the reservoir. It would take up much less space under the stand. But for now, I got the 10-gallon, so I might as well use it. I simply grabbed my hose straight from my tap, filled up the 10-gallon tank, and then of course added a little bit of Chem Prime to make sure to get the dechlorination process going. Something to keep in mind when you're filling your top-off reservoir is that with any top-off water, you need to fill it with fresh water, even though it's a saltwater tank. You do not want to top off with more salt water because that's going to increase your salinity levels. So keep that in mind, always fresh water. And since we're doing a tap water only tank, I'm filling my reservoir up with tap water, of course. This reservoir is where your ATO is going to pull water from and add it to the tank as the water evaporates. Once in the blue, open your stand up, check the water level in your reservoir. If you see it's halfway or a little less than half, go ahead and just fill it back up with more tap water. That's all you gotta do, nothing special. Here's your sensor unit. This is what reacts to the water level that goes on the top of your tank. Here's your pump that goes into the reservoir, shoots the water up through the hose right here, and fills your tank. This is your check valve, and this is a very important piece. I'm gonna try to zoom in here and see if you guys can see it, but there's a little up arrow right there on the check valve. What this does is prevent a back siphon from continuing to add water to your tank once the pump turns off. That's a terrible thing to happen if your water continues to siphon out of the reservoir and fill your tank even after the pump turns off. That's what the check valve is for. Mind you, that won't happen if your system is set up like this, where your reservoir is much lower to the ground than your tank is. Gravity, people, that's how it works. But I have to mention this check valve in case you don't have a system like that, where a back siphon could happen if you didn't have this check valve in. So I'm simply gonna start with the sensor up on top. I'm gonna drop the bottom half to the back so I can grab it through the hole. Leave my sensor kind of dangling up here for the moment. Come down with me here. I just wanna grab this wire and make sure I can pull it through the hole. We'll set this up down here afterwards. The sensor is a very simple installation. It comes with a nice little magnet right behind it. Take the magnet off. There you go. I'm gonna put the sensor right in between my intake and my output right here. I'm gonna move my plants out of the way for a second. Excuse me, guys. All right, and look how much space this sensor is gonna take. It's gonna sit right there, right above the water line. So in front here, we have the optical sensor, and then on the bottom is, I guess, the wet sensor. So it can feel when there's no water touching the bottom, and the optical sensor is the second sensor that's gonna sense when the water level is dropping. Take our magnet, put it to the back of the tank, and it's gonna hold it right in place. So I'm gonna raise it to right there. That's our sensor spot. Next thing we're gonna drop behind the tank is the hose itself. And this goes on really easily in the back of the tank as well. Who makes these things? These never-ending loops. Where's my knife? So it comes with a nice little hose holder that's gonna go very easily in the back of your tank. Check this out. Can go on frames or frameless. Open up the little screw, put it right on the back. Tighten your screw if you have to. And that's right where your hose is gonna go into right there. Look at that, nice and snug, like a rug. I'm gonna keep it right here above the water line actually, just for instructional purposes. I wanna actually be able to show you guys when the water's coming into the tank. And we're gonna manipulate this, and I'm gonna show you exactly what Ozzy showed me of how easily this starts and stops the water from coming into the tank. All right, let's head down underneath. Grab my hose, ready for the reservoir. Let's connect the pump. That should be easy enough. Nothing to it. Connect your hose to your pump side. I'm not putting the check valve in like I discussed because my reservoir is much, much lower than the tank. Obviously, it's underneath, and there's not gonna be any back siphon that's gonna be able to rise through this entire hose all the way back up to the tank. It's not gonna happen. Again with the zippies, the backwards zippies. Must be a lot of left-handed people at XP Aqua. All right, take my power cord out of there and dump the pump in there. Now the pump does have little suction cups on the bottom here to make sure that it stays at the bottom of the reservoir and it's not floating up at the top. There you go. That thing's not going nowhere. Now we take our power side cable and we're gonna connect it to the sensor up above. I'm going power into the left side. I don't really know if it matters much, but the power's in the left here and the pump cable is going into the right hand side. Now I am planning to mount this. You can mount this right here because this does have indicator lights to let you know if there's any malfunctions, if it's working properly, if your reservoir is empty, all that good stuff you can find in the instruction manual of this unit here. But I want to power this thing on right now and show you guys what's up. So here we go with power. Okay, here we go. Solid blue light. Now we got a little bit of an orangey light. Back to solid blue, which I think means it's functioning. The pump just kicked on. Let's go check it out upstairs. Come on, quick, quick, quick. Look at that water. Look at it filling right there. Now if I take the sensor out of water, it's filling. When I put it back in the water, it cuts off. Look how fast that was. Let's do that one more time. The sensor's completely underwater. It's not filling from the hose here. I'm gonna pull the sensor out slowly, and as soon as that optical sensor is above water, there it is. Bam. We are filling with fresh water. I'm gonna dip it back in the water. Bam, cut off. Look how simple that is. One more time. Out of the water. Give it a second or two. Bam. I love it. In the water. Woo wee. I love it, boy. Works great. Just like Ozzy said it would. So let's finish setting this up now. I'm gonna grab my hose here, put it into the holder. I do have to set this up after I get my lid back on to make sure everything's working right. So I'm glad I caught this little issue for some of you that don't have the same setup that I have. If you look here, my hose is outside of the water. So when the water cuts off, there isn't going to be any backflow coming from the pump because of gravity, like I said earlier. But if your water level is much higher than mine and your hose is actually submerged in the water like this, when this thing turns on and sends water in this way, when it cuts off, it is going to create a backflow back down into your reservoir. And you don't want that, because then you can overflow your reservoir. Here's the setup, how it looks once my lid is back on. Luckily, I did have these corners cut out of my lid, so my hose is going right into that corner there. And my sensor is right underneath that spot right there. See if we could check it out from this angle. Let me zoom in a little bit. Maybe you guys can see it. It's so small. Look at it right up there, right in between the out and the in of the FX2 canister. Nice and camouflaged. You could barely even notice that thing up there at all. You can barely see it in the tank. Check out the setup from underneath. I've got the controller mounted on the back panel right there. A solid blue light is good. That means it's working correctly. When it's a circular blue light, that means it's actually pumping water into the tank. Any other color or audible indication means that something is wrong, and you better check it right away. But Kev, just because you are able to use tap water successfully in a saltwater tank doesn't mean that I'll be able to use my tap water, because all tap water is different. Trust me, there's some trolls in the comments right now that have been dying to point that out. Because you know how it is, once you prove one part of their argument wrong, then they morph their argument into something totally different. But don't worry, I'm already a step ahead of the Tommy trolls, and I'm gonna prove to you that you can keep a saltwater tank with any tap water, no matter how dirty it may be, no matter what part of the world you come from. It's in that video right there. Make sure you check it out. But before you go, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace. By the way, during post-editing, I realized that he was hiding under the rock the entire time I was filming that video. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware that he is here with me, you know, to avoid any confusion.